What we're going to cover today is unlocking the power of the enterprise browser in real-world use cases. And so just to kind of set expectations, a bit of an agenda for today, what we're doing, I'll do quick introductions. And why don't I just take care of that right now? Joining me today as co-presenter and host is Gary Mandelstam. Gary's our Director of Solutions Engineering. And my name is Peter Lunk. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Mammoth Cyber. We're going to talk you through a quick overview of the enterprise browser, just to kind of get us all on the same page on what the browser is and does. And then we'll go through three different use cases. So we'll go through secure contractor access. We'll go through some data leakage prevention examples in a second use case. And then we'll talk about where we can fill some gaps. A lot of large companies have done pretty extensive SASE deployments now, and there's some holes in that the enterprise browser is really ideally suited to fill. So we'll talk about that use case finally. And then we'll do some wrap up and Q&A. So why don't I just dive right in? I'm going to do a few slides just kind of explaining the enterprise browser and where we are with that. So if you look at the modern workforce, really everything is getting done through the browser these days. And so that's connecting people on their corporate devices using BYOD devices, internal developers, remote contractors. All those people are using the browser to access a number of different resources. That could be obviously things like websites, but also SaaS services, company SaaS services, and it can also be accessing company private applications. And those could be hosted on-prem or in a data center or even up in the public cloud. And people are using the browser to access all of these things. If you look at the enterprise browser as using the enterprise browser as that access point, it's going to be a very familiar experience to people. It's based on Chromium, which is the technology behind Google Chrome and Microsoft Edge and a number of other browsers. And so the user experience is really the same as using any other browser. And the browser gives us a bunch of advantages here. And that's really, if you look at the benefits, there's a couple of areas where it's really visible, and that's around conditional access enforcement and security controls. So with the conditional access enforcement, we get to decide who's got access to what and from where. And so the browser connects in with your identity provider and it pulls in identity and entitlement information so you can control who's got access to which apps. We can do some device security posture checks. Gary's going to show this in one of our examples here. But just making sure that whatever device is connecting is up to date, has the latest patches, and has a good security posture before we allow it to access your applications. And then finally, some geolocation validation. So you may not want people to access certain applications if they're out of the country, for example. So those are some of the conditional access enforcement capabilities. On the security control side, we'll have access security is, rather than kind of a VPN-like approach where people, once they're on the network, have access to everything, this is we can control specifically which applications and SaaS applications people are allowed to connect to. We've got some great data security capabilities because the browser sees all this stuff in plain text. We can do some really neat things like data masking, browser controls like upload, download, copy, paste controls. And then finally, because it's a browser, it's a natural place to do some of the things like web security, URL filtering, blocking certain categories, and then doing some malware scanning as well. So that's kind of how the browser does its job. And then if you look at how the people typically that would be on this webinar are going to interact with the Mammoth admin console. So the users at your company would be using the Mammoth browser as the enterprise browser. And then you have an admin console, which is a SaaS service. This is where you set your policies, look at the really detailed audit logs we get, and some additional capabilities like deep identity that lets you identify what other applications and maybe unsanctioned applications people are using, but just gives you information about that. And the admin console is also where we connect out to a number of important tech integrations. So that could be everything from your identity provider, whether that's Okta or Azure, or whoever you might be using there, to your SIM tool, whether that's Splunk or another SIM tool. So providing we can offload those audit logs into the SIM tool that have that for your standard security protocols. And so that's really the enterprise browser in a nutshell. The common use cases we're going to talk about are the contractor access and BYOD, preventing data leakage, filling in key gaps in SASE. We're going to start with the first one, which is secure remote access for contractors. And there's some benefits to the enterprise browser in this use case. One of the top ones is just it's faster to onboard people. If you've got a group of contractors in a foreign country and you no longer have to ship laptops and worry about when you're going to get them back, we can enforce that device posture before they access. So if they're using their own devices or if employees are using their own devices, you can enforce device posture. It's a much better user experience than what people maybe have experienced using VDI. It's much faster, behaves just like a direct connection on a normal browser. Uh, Quite a bit lower cost than VDI as well. So that's a good benefit there. Finally, enterprise visibility. We get to really see that the enterprise can see and security team can see what people are doing on the browser and in those applications. And then business continuity becomes an important topic, right? We're in hurricane season, so whether that's a natural disaster or an IT outage, people can use their own devices. If they, for some reason, don't have access to their corporate devices, maybe those are in an office somewhere, they can still get at corporate resources using their own device and have a secure connection to do that. So I think that the next step here, I'll probably pass it over to Gary here to give us a bit of a demo on how the secure remote access for contractors would work. All right, Gary?
Sounds good. Let me start here with the Mammoth Enterprise browser. And I'd like to show you kind of the end user experience first, then I'll show you the admin portal with kind of just for starters. We'll come back to some of this in another example, but let's keep the current kind of use case as far as BYOD and contractor in mind here. So yeah, this is the enterprise browser, totally customizable with branding and even the splash page. I would start here by, of course, for unmanaged, I can download the browser from the Mammoth site. You could host the executable and have folks download it. They just download it, install it just like a regular browser. And then they have a couple levels of authentication and device verification so that I would authenticate either via IDP or even local authentication if it's kind of for a short-term type of a contractor situation. I can go through device posture and check out and ensure that at least that device that they're bringing has a minimum level of security and OS levels and security patches, etc. And I can even do time-based access too. Maybe a certain group of people should only be working on certain applications on certain days of the week or certain times. I can do that too, as well as geo-based. At any rate, when I first open a tab in the browser, once I go through that authentication, I see a pretty simple layout here. As you can tell, it looks really just like regular Chrome. All kind of standard menu items. You've got bookmarks across the top. Again, it can be branded. What's really key here, though, is that I have access to apps that I've been provided in my group or to do my job. And it could be internal apps and private apps. It could be SaaS apps. It could be other long tail apps that are not part of maybe a SASE environment. We'll get to that later. But in any case here, you can see across the top, I've got my apps. Could be 2, it could be 20, it could be 100. I've got also access to maybe there's servers via SSH or RDP here. And then also, if I want to bring over apps from, say, Azure or from Okta or from OneLogin, very simple to do that as well, as you can see. And then when I open an app like one of those in Mammoth, I now have control over what happens in those apps. Maybe I don't want to allow downloads from OneDrive when I'm using BYO. And I can restrict also apps to Mammoth versus other browsers as well. All right. So just really quickly then, if I go to my app launcher and say I want to access internal Elasticsearch, I hit a tile and I'm really just off to the races. Don't have to worry about starting up VPN clients or doing any sort of weird reverse proxies or anything like that. I can simply go there. I'm browsing in Elastic now. I can do queries, etc. People that are familiar with this, but very simple to do that. And then, you know, say I wanted to check out, say, SSH. I wanted to log into a server via SSH. This uses a cert login. Just a click. We support both SSH within a browser window. You can actually use native clients as well. And, you know, here I am. So very simple to quickly do that. One last thing now that I wanted to show you. Let me just switch it off to the admin interface here. So you can access the admin interface from any browser. It doesn't have to be through the Mammoth browser, although you certainly could. The way it's laid out, you got kind of the major features along the left here: defining applications, bringing in users and groups and device information, and then creating policies. Who has access to what? Just like Peter was mentioning, who has access to what and when, and what are the actions and the policy they can do there on those apps. So I just wanted to show you, if I go into just kind of, as we were talking about on the this use case, if I go into policies and I go into conditional access and I show my device posture profiles, here's where, for instance, I set up that minimum device posture that if I'm bringing BYOD, I probably want to enforce. And also things like time-based access. So here I have a policy where I have a time schedule 8 to 5 on weekdays is allowed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to use those apps. Last, the visibility that we provide is really bar none. So especially when it's a contractor type of a use case and you want full visibility, maybe even audit or compliance ability, you can see kind of everything that I've done. I've just opened those SSH, that session, that's that just right there. If I've interacted with other apps. And then finally, there is the ability to record sessions. And you can see if I could find one, but there's some sessions that have been recorded here, whether it's SSH or the entire web session. So that gives you a little quick preview of both the end user and the admin. Want to hand it back to you, Peter, for the next use case.
All right, thanks, Gary. So if we covered off contractor access, secure remote access, the second use case we really wanted to touch on was preventing data leakage. And so if you look at the benefits of the enterprise browser here, you've got a few again. So Gary touched on this before, blocking uploads to personal accounts. We hear from a lot of our customers about, hey, we had some changes on the sales team and someone leaving has uploaded all of the current pipeline to take with them off to the next competitive company. And so it's also, hey, how do we prevent download? So just containing exposure, trying to keep people from downloading things that are possibly malicious, and the rest of that. So, and then copy and paste. We have some interesting capabilities here where you don't want people copying and pasting things into large language models, maybe for sensitive financial information or proprietary information, customer information, and just trying to contain that copy paste to a group of trusted apps. And finally, we want to be able to detect unsanctioned app usage. So, there may be perfectly good reasons for employees to do this, and this is a way for you to monitor and say, hey, maybe I do want to bring these into the corporate envelope and provide proper security around them. But you can have a view here and see what apps are actually being used by the employees. And so I think this is probably a good place to hand it back to Gary and show you a demo of how we do some of this data leakage prevention.
Sure thing. Sounds good. Let me share that again. And let's go back. This one really, let me show you some of the examples on the end user side as far as some of those DLP controls and kind of what they'd look like here. So for instance, let me go, and again, so this is the end user working with the Mammoth browser, and depending on the user, their group, I may have different policies of what I can do. And also depending on, am I using a managed device? Am I using an unmanaged device? I may have different policy on what I can download, upload, copy, paste, even grab screens, things like watermarking, things like that. So let me show you a couple of them. So just the purposes of a couple examples I'm going to show you. Let's say that Box and OneDrive are my corporate cloud storage, kind of sanctioned, if you will, applications. Whereas Dropbox here is a personal cloud storage that someone may use. All right. And In Box here, again, corporate cloud storage, maybe I'm working on some documents here. Maybe I'm a customer service rep and I have a customer case number here, etc. We also, besides controlling uploads, downloads, copy, paste, we can actually look at the content. And if the content has sensitive information, which you may define as well, if it's tagged as a sensitive document, we can also do that and scan for that and then prevent that from coming down, especially to maybe maybe an unmanaged device, for instance. So for instance, one of this budgeting or planning docs happens to be tagged high confidentiality with Microsoft sensitivity tags. So if I try to download something like this, you'll see that it will scan it and it's going to say, sorry, you can't download this to personal devices. In this case, it could have been an unmanaged device. This customer case number happens to have a bunch of identifiers in it. And we have predefined identifiers out of the box for common ones which you'd imagine. You can also define your own regexes to look for patterns, any pattern for like a medical record number, a customer case number, etc. When I try to download that, similar. So we're scanning the content and this time looking for actual identifiers within the document. There is kind of give you another example, maybe from OneDrive here, is that if I am allowed to download something, I can kind of stop the user in the middle of that for certain type of information or certain apps and say, hey, do you realize this is just be careful with this. This is safe. This is sensitive. Or even, hey, please provide a little justification for your needing to do this. So if I go ahead and try to download, say, a document here, this one's saying, hey, please provide justification. So I enter my justification. That is logged for auditing purposes, so I can then later track that if I need to. So, both of gives a clue to the user that this is sensitive, but also can record this data for compliance purposes. Another example, like personal, here's my Dropbox personal cloud storage in Dropbox. If I try to say upload something, maybe from a managed device that's going to personal storage, maybe that's a no-no for certain groups or users or my organization. So if I pick a file and I try to upload, say this, whatever that was, PowerPoint or otherwise there, upload to personal cloud storage is not permitted. Of course, there's customized messages here too, but you get the idea. My last example on the data control is, it's pretty cool. I can define web apps that are part of an app category. And I can control what content flows between the apps in that app category. And I can also say that if it's outside, if I try to say copy data outside of that app category, it wouldn't be allowed, even to native apps that I have on my Win machine here. So for instance, let's start with OneDrive. And again, OneDrive, I've categorized OneDrive and Box as an app category, which is my corporate cloud storage. So let's go into, say, a document, this one in OneDrive. And I'm just gonna, just for fun, I'm just gonna take a paragraph and I'm gonna copy, all right? And now I'm gonna go over to Box, which is in that same app category. And in Box, I'm gonna create a little file here. I'm gonna create new, and I'm gonna create a Box note, as they call it. And I'm gonna, I'm just typing now. Here is my info. I'm just copying it to another source within my defined applications, and I paste in here, and you'll see it pasted just like it should, right, as you'd expect. Now let me go to Dropbox and do something similar here. Let me create a little paper doc in Dropbox. Now again, Dropbox is outside of my kind of approved app category. And if I go ahead and paste into here, you're going to see that that action is now blocked. It knows that this app, a web app, is outside of that category. And this also applies, I'll just bring up a notepad. So this is Notepad just running locally. If I try to copy this to any local app as well running, I'll just do a paste. You can see that we just paste in this Mammoth protected content. You're not going to get the real content here. So very powerful to be able to create these categories, and this can totally be customized per group, of course, as well in the apps that they're working with. So hopefully that gives you a little preview of DLP. Peter, take it away for our last use case.
All right, thanks, Gary. The last case I wanted to touch on was filling some gaps in SASE deployment. So a lot of large companies have spent significant amount of effort into large scale SASE deployments, and it's a lot. There's an agent that's got to go on every device. There's a lot of configuration settings. These are complicated systems, and people have invested a lot in there. But there's some gaps. And so the enterprise browser is a really cool way of being able to fill the gaps in those SASE deployments. People don't want to hear that, hey, we spent all this money, we did all this work, and there's still a bunch of security holes. And so there's a great way that you can do this now by using the enterprise browser. You can secure unmanaged devices. So that was always a problem for these SASE solutions. And then again, extending those browser controls, right? They don't have control over the browser. So being able to, handle and control things like copy and paste, just what Gary was just showing you with enhancing the DLP, the data leakage, you can do that in SASE environments now as well. And then if you look at how some of these SaaS apps were protected on the CASB side, right? Most of these protections are provided through API integrations, and the CASB vendors haven't gotten through, and they haven't gotten to every single app. There's a bunch of long tail apps that could use small nichey things, but they're important to your business. And in order to actually provide protection to those, it's a real pain point for the SASE providers to do anything custom on that. You may have to wait a long time to get protection for that. But if you're using an enterprise browser, it just kind of plugs right in, and we can provide protection for those right away. So those are some of the benefits. I think, Carrie, I'll have you show kind of how we would do that specifically in the product here as we move forward.
Yep. A couple last examples here of that. And yeah, I mean, the enterprise browser for the unmanaged use case, being able to get to that SASE environment from really anywhere now is huge, and a lot more simple to obviously set up than working with, like, reverse proxy gets a little clumsy. Installing an agent for your SASE gets a little clumsy sometimes. This is really very simple to do. Let me share my screen right now. And let's go back to, so let me I wanted to show folks, just to your use case, Peter, around, for starters, long tail apps. Maybe they're not sanctioned apps. They haven't been set up in SASE yet. You want to enable them on a managed device very quickly. You want the visibility in them, right? And maybe some of those apps aren't fully set up to do reverse proxy or an API type of control yet. So really simple here. I just wanted to point out that I simply define my app on this screen. Very simple to define the app. I previously defined users and groups, probably imported via IDP, of course. And then I create a policy, who has access to what app, and then what can they do there. And you can see some of this user activity: download, deny, allow access, copy, paste, etc. And then, should I be recording it? Could I do a session recording? Should I do other controls on it, etc.? So my point here is really simple to set up control around long tail apps that maybe may take some more time to actually kind of encompass and bring into the whole SASE environment. So that's pretty huge as well. That, as well as the ability to use SASE very easily from unmanaged. And then finally, I want to just finally go back to our my Mammoth browser again. And I want to show kind of some unique browser, enterprise browser features that you really can't do in SASE or other network-based controls. We're bringing the security at the browser. So some unique things we can do, especially when compared with this in this SASE kind of use case. So number one, we can differentiate between personal and corporate logins to some of the corporate to corporate, workplace suites like G Suite or 365, etc. And it may be that on a managed device, I don't want to allow people to go into their personal Gmail or personal 365. They could bring down malicious files, etc. Various security reasons or data control reasons here. So in this case, if I try to sign in, I'm an end user. I'm on the Mammoth browser, even though it's hard to tell because it looks like Chrome, right? I go ahead and sign in to Gmail here. And in this case, I'm going to try to put in my personal Gmail. I hit next, and sorry, use of personal Gmail is not permitted here. Okay. And yes, it's possible to then control, maybe on a corporate device, this is the only browser that's allowed, or you control and limit app usage to only the Mammoth browser. Couple other kind of unique use cases for enterprise browsers in this scenario, especially for SASE, is being able to control copy paste, right? It's very a desktop centric, browser centric thing. Can't really do that in the network. So in this case, I've got familiar ChatGPT, could be any Gen AI. There's a lot of controls, of course, around copying information, internal information, proprietary information into a public LLM. So maybe I try to, as a user, I'm saying, hey, let's use Gen AI to summarize the following financial info, right? And then I go ahead and, put in and I paste in some financial info. It's going to stop me, right? Contact your leader for access to Gen AI systems for work use, or whatever the message may be there. And then also just last, of course, we're controlling that browser screen, so we can put any amount of watermarking on the screen. You can see that there when I refreshed that a little bit earlier today. It gives people a clue that, this is a corporate application. I need to just watch what I'm doing. It also even could, if someone tries to take a picture of that, obviously that would be on the screen as well. And then very last here, but a very cool, I think, kind of a sexy feature is, since we are, again, controlling that browser screen, we can mask out any sensitive data on screen on the fly. So for instance, if I went to this site on a regular browser, this happens to be just a DLP test site, and I reload this screen, of course, we're displaying all the information here, including maybe some sensitive credit card numbers. The use case here could also be, say, a customer service rep getting columns of data from a legacy app, and they really shouldn't be seeing everything. They should just be seeing the last four, the first two, or any identifier. So in this case, now I go to my enterprise browser, and as you can see, as I'm reloading this really quickly, on the fly, I have a policy that says to block out, obfuscate all the numbers except the first two and the last four. And I could do that with any regular expression, by the way. Could be a customer number, it could be, again, a medical record number. I could obfuscate all that out. So some really cool, unique things that the enterprise browser can do for you, as well as all the other stuff that kind of we talked about in the use cases. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to you, Peter.
All right, thanks, Gary. That
Yep.
was super cool. I love the on the fly masking stuff. Okay, so let me just go through. We've got a few minutes left for Q&A. I can see some Q&A in there. I'm going to try to pull a couple of these out and see if we have kind of the most relevant ones to cover here. Looks like a couple are technical. I've got one I can handle. Gary, well, I'm gonna throw a technical one your way to kick this off. So the question is around how does the browser actually get connected to private apps? So I guess they're not talking about SaaS apps. When you have a corporate private app, how does the browser actually get connected to those?
Yeah. So we simply we deploy what we call a service edge, and it's really a simple container that establishes a TLS tunnel, outbound tunnel, It just needs to be deployed on the network where your resource is located, whether that's a web app or a server for RDP or SSH, etc. It just needs to have connectivity there. It reaches out, establishes a TLS tunnel through the Mammoth cloud, so that when now there's a tile, like you saw when I did that Elasticsearch example, I click on the tile, that routes to the Mammoth cloud, and then through that service edge connector. You don't have to have a public IP out there, which is really key and easy to manage, of course. No public IP is required, and it's unique for every customer and every kind of application source. So you pull that code, that container, directly from the Mammoth service that is customized for you. So, and that figures out all the key exchanges and such. So that's how we do it. It's really, we reserve usually a half an hour to set that up. Pretty simple setup to get that. Yeah.
I'm going to throw another one your way. This will probably be our last question. We're running low on time. So I thought this was an interesting question, is how do I make sure that a user is only accessing a company's SaaS app through the Mammoth browser as opposed to, I guess, like the regular Chrome browser?
Yeah. Yeah. No, good question, right? For any apps that utilize SSO, you can basically do this so that and the control is on the IDP side. So basically, Mammoth can catch that initial IDP request and route it through the Mammoth cloud, just that first request. So that obviously that request is going to come from Mammoth IPs. And then in your IDP, you just say for this particular app, auth should only come from this range. And if it doesn't come from that range, obviously you don't allow the auth. So that's how we're able to restrict certain apps to Mammoth for that control, for the visibility in any of these use cases, really. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, well, let me just do a quick summary as we wrap up here. I think if you look at the enterprise browser, it's really apparent that this solves some important real world use cases, right? And so this is going to provide a real improvement to the overall security posture of your company. And it's just an easy to deploy solution. So it's a fit for a company of any size, and it's easy to get up and running. It's easy to use. So many security products these days are quite complex. But this is an easy one to get up and get started, and then you can dive way down in the weeds, as Gary started to show you on some of these use cases. There's a lot of flexibility, but just getting up and working is really straightforward. So we covered 3 use cases today. I'd encourage you to head over to Mammoth Cyber and take a look if you have use cases that maybe is one of those 3 we covered today, or maybe it's something different. There's a host of use cases beyond just the 3 that we covered today. And schedule a demo, and we're happy to do private demos for people looking to explore additional use cases as well. So with that, I'll say thanks, Gary, for helping out with the presentation today, and thanks to our audience for attending the webinar. Appreciate it, guys.